Thank you for checking out Real Talk Personal Finance. Shit's about to get real. Cash Flow King with you today. And today in episode 54, Evictions Happen, featuring the Rent Reverend. Before we introduce him to the show, we got a couple of quick announcements. Want to let everyone know that the e-newsletter put out by Cube Crusher, I edited and I put a couple of things in there, but primarily it is compiled by and comprised by Cube Crusher. That is out. That was sent out to all of our premium subscribers. So anyone that's a premium subscriber, for some reason, if you did not receive that e-newsletter in your inbox, please let us know, and we will be happy to resend it out to you.
Premium!
Cube and I are supposed to be recording that premium episode going over the newsletter sometime this weekend. Today is Friday, August 4th. That should be out shortly. And for those of you that are not yet premium subscribers, there's a link in the show notes that says become a premium subscriber today. Feel free to subscribe and support the show. You can read about all the benefits once you click that link, and you will be able to go ahead and get the e-newsletter and have access to all the premium podcasts. Okay, speaking of premium, we have a very special guest with us today, first-time guest with us today, who also happens to be, this is the second time we've now had on a premium subscriber as a guest. Please welcome to episode 54, Rent Reverend. Hey, real quick, everyone, this is the Cash Flow King here. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. We kind of recorded this at the last minute, so our guest today was recording on his phone. The audio quality at times can be a little bit muffled. I did the best I could with editing, but it is what it is. Also, his dog was pretty much walking in circles in the background for a majority of the episode as well, so you'll hear a lot of clicking and clacking, and that's his dog walking around. I also tried to edit this out, but unfortunately wasn't able to do so. So it's a really good episode, but you might have a couple of annoyances. But I think if you can be patient and power through it, you guys will find it worthwhile. Now back to the show.
Hey, Cash Flow King, how's it going?
It's going great. Friday night. Can't think of anything better to do right now than record this podcast with you. So thanks for being willing to come on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I like it.
No problem. All right, so we're ultimately going to get into evictions and how they happen and talk to you about that. But before we jump the gun and get into all that, tell us a little bit about who you are and how did you get started in real estate investing and anything else you think would be important for the listeners to know.
I'm first and foremost a career fireman, but I kind of wear a bunch of different hats. I'm a family man. I've got a tile business, and I also have several rental properties. I always wanted to dabble into the rental property game because my parents were in it, but and my goal was to have one by the time I was 30, and I kind of overshot that. I think I was 32 before I ended up with one, but yeah, I got into the whole rental thing, maybe preemptively, and I learned some hard lessons along the way.
Very good. I'm sure we'll get into that, I guess. So we talk a lot on this show about different types of investments, and Cube Crusher likes to give me shit about the fact that I like real estate investments. So there you go, Cube. We got another real estate investor on the show. But we also talk about different ways to do it, and my overwhelming and overarching theme has always been and continues to be pretty much everything I do is passive. And I know there's people that invest in real estate where that's not necessarily the case, or at least initially that's not necessarily the case. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least when you first started, you probably fell into the camp of the do-it-yourself type of real estate investor. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you decided to go that route initially?
Yeah, 100%. And I even went as far as my first couple I built myself. So I kind of knew them inside and out, and it helped with my margins a little bit. And I talked to a bunch of different people along the way and thought, this can't be that hard. You just rent to people and they pay your bills, and hopefully you can make a little bit of the, to me, it was simple math at the beginning. And it not saying that it's not, but that I learned the hard way. People are not always, they won't always do what they said they're going to do, essentially. And then you get into the maintenance and just the whole gamut of running a property by yourself. And it can be extremely stressful when you pile it on top of everything else that most of us have going on in life. So, yeah, like I said, I learned the hard way for sure.
Well, let's, I guess, get into that a little bit. So, the title of the show is Evictions Happen. I think that may have happened more than once in the relatively short period of time that you've owned rentals. I've had my first eviction not too long ago. I had a little bit of a teaser where I thought it was going to happen. It didn't ultimately happen, and then it finally happened. Tell us a little bit about, in terms of self-management and what you had to go through with the eviction process. Maybe, you obviously don't give us their personal information or anything like that, but like, okay, this particular tenant, what was it like from start to finish in terms of when you did the screening process? How did they present themselves? How qualified were they? Why did you rent to them? And then ultimately, what happened where shit hit the fan and they didn't hold up their end of the bargain?
Well, I'll kind of go from the beginning of this property. Like I said, when we closed on it, and my mother, who's I hold in high regard with for everything, but obviously being a good landlord and a good judge of character, and she's been renting properties for 20 years. So I kind of stole her lease and took notes from her and how she screened people, and it's kind of the old school way of, she wanted to meet everybody in person, and it was kind of tried and true, but it was also a headache. So anyway, I tried doing that. She two tenants, and they turned out to be great. They stayed the whole year, and both of them ended up moving out after their first year. Their lease was up. So now it was kind of, I was babied along the way on the first one. And it's kind of like, all right, well, we showed you a little bit how to do it. You need to figure it out on your own. And I knew that. And so I posted on a few social media sites and got blown up by, 2 or 3 thousand hits in a matter of days. And it's almost overwhelming at that point. You're like, how do I even begin to screen through these people? And so I kind of came up with my own process and line of it eliminated it pretty quick to where I wasn't just wasting my time driving out there meeting people every single hour of every single day. And I ended up, kind of narrowing it down to 2 or 3 different people that seemed to have their finances in line and at least enough to pay their rent and had good credit scores and had good references. And so I met them out there. And this particular lady, she was in her 60s. She was raising her grandkids. She was very polite and just everything you would want in a tenant. Drove a nice vehicle that was clean. Had first month's rent deposit, no problem. And it was great. Honestly, she moved in. I would go in to change the air filters like some landlords do, just kind of check the place out every month. And then after the first couple months, I mean, it was cleaner than my own house, and it smelled like your grandma's house. There was Buttersworth candy in the dish on the table. And anyway, so I felt comfortable with her, and I kind of just like, hey, here's 6 months worth of filters. I'm gonna leave you alone. She was sending me rent on time every month, I think for 8 months, and hadn't had an issue. And say what happened, but I think it was October in the month. Yeah, that's right. So she was 8 months in October, and no rent. So I called her, hey, what's going on? And she said, well, I had some stuff come up, and I'm gonna be late on my rent. And since she's been such a good renter to this point, I said, you know what? Don't even worry about the late fee. She gave me, kind of a plan of action. She said, I'll, in a week or 10 days or something like that, I'll have you paid. Well, a week, 10 days went by, no money. And I kind of just trading, and I let her get to the point where she was a whole month late. And I told her at that point, I said, you're gonna be late 2 months on the 5th of November. If you can't come up with the money, you're gonna have to be you're gonna have to move out. You have to pay your rent essentially. Still civil, and she was still talking to me, texting, all that good stuff. So I didn't feel like totally, I wasn't mad at that point. And that's what happens. Emotions play a factor at some point because they're The point, they're stealing from you at a certain point. It's what you feel like. They're taking advantage of you being nice and having a nice place to live, and you got to pay for it. So November rolls around, and I go, all right, you're out. Per the lease, you got 7 days. That's how my lease reads. You need to be out of here. Well, she wasn't out. So then I go to the sheriff's department because I start talking to people like, hey, what do I need to do? I call my mom, go, hey, have you ever evicted anybody? She goes, in 20 years, I've never evicted anybody. What am I going to do here? So I start calling around the people I know, around the community and trying to figure out the best way to do it. And they say go to the sheriff's office and they'll go out and post an eviction notice. So that's what I did. And they posted a 7 day eviction notice. Well, I waited my 7 days and I went back in. I think I went to the circuit court at that point, and they said, do you have a copy of your lease? And then we will assign you a court date. That's what they said. I was like, well, I don't have one on me. I know I've got a signed lease. Let me go look. And I dug through every truck, vehicle, filing cabinet, everywhere I could think of. Electronic methods. I couldn't remember exactly where it was at. I knew she signed a lease, but I could not find it anywhere. Of course, she didn't know that. But per our state, it's a 30 day. If you don't have a lease, it's a 30 day eviction notice. So it fell under that. So I'm already 2 months out on rent, and then another week, and so what's that put us at 9 weeks? And they go, well, now you need to wait another 30 days. 12 weeks, 14 weeks, something like that. And then I'm like, all right, well, so I'll wait my 30 days and we'll get her out of here. Well, it still doesn't work like that. You go down to the circuit court and they go, well, you need to go over here to the sheriff's office. And they have to post another week long thing to tell her that she has a court date. And you have to pay another, I think, $180 for them to process that and pay the guy to drive out there and put it on the door and all this stuff. So finally, after I think, see, that happened. And then they said, all right, it was another 2 weeks. And finally, my court date came up, and I went to the courthouse. Sat there. The judge called me to the stand. Said, "What's going on?" The lady didn't show up. She was a no-show. I told him what was going on, and he said, "All right, well, we'll kick her out. Well, the sheriff can kick her out, but she has another 7 days." So I think by this point I'm like 4.5 months into this thing. I mean, this lady's got me for, $6,000 at this point or something. I mean, I was sick to my stomach. She wouldn't answer the phone. She wasn't doing anything that she was supposed to do. And there was no communication. And, I know I'm kind of rambling, but,
No,
I'm
this is
kind of
good. This is
passionate
what the
about that.
listeners want. I'm actually entertained right now, and I've heard a lot of this before, but it's kind of nice. It's a refresher for me. So keep going.
Right, right. Okay. And it even got to, the point where you talk to people that have, I mean, they've been in the real business 30, 40, 50 years, and some of them have never actually had to have the sheriff come move them out. So the day comes, back up just a fuzz, just because this is almost hard to believe. So I was at the firehouse on Christmas Eve, and this lady calls me. It's negative 22 degrees in the Midwest. Most people probably remember if they're from this area. It got really, really cold. She calls me. I hadn't talked to her in 3 months or whatever, 2 months. Says, hey, I just want to let you know, I couldn't afford to pay my electric bill, so they turned it off. And I said, you realize it's negative 22 degrees outside. Like, all the pipes are going to freeze and bust. So I guess she was just would pay her bill, I guess, is what she was hoping for. But of course, I had no sympathy for her at that point. So we get to the date where the sheriff is assigned to come out and essentially evict her forcefully if necessary from the property. And we pull up, and she's still living in the property, just like it was her first day living there, just living her best life, watching Marge is doing in there, but she wasn't paying her rent. That's for damn sure. Uh, but I mean, they knocked on the door, and she's like, I'm not moving out today. And he physically had to remove her from the property and make her get in her vehicle and leave. And at this point, I haven't been in there in 6 months. I go in, and it literally is like a hoarder's been in there. It looks like a pet, it looks like a flea market. I mean, it's wall to wall boxes. It's the garage is full, and I go, what do I have to do here? And he says, well, she's not allowed back, so you need to put it all in the front yard. And I'm going, dude, I'm here about like I ain't got time to do that. I got 100 things to do today. And so I ended up getting lucky, and I called a guy, another retired fireman there, and he has a moving company, and he helped me out. He sent 4 or 5 guys over, and I helped them. And it took us like I want to say 5 hours to move out everything out of a 1,250 square foot apartment, three bed, 2 bath. But I mean, it was unbelievable.
Now, was this the same? This wasn't the same negative 22-degree day, right? This is after that.
Yeah, this was after the
Okay.
negative 22. Like she just, I hadn't, yeah, we didn't have any contact, and then all of a sudden she called and was like, "Oh yeah, by the way, can you help me out?" And I was like, "No."
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. So you call
but
a
the one
retired fireman. They get the moving company out there. 4 or 5 guys. Takes you 5 hours, and so you guys are putting all her stuff on the front lawn, right?
on the front lawn, man. And
Oh.
she did go get she went and got yeah, we moved her out, and it was like I felt like it was the best day of my life, even though it was the worst day of my life. I was just so glad to be rid of her. And yeah, and I mean to talk about, I mean, it's literally, I think that apartment, the next person in line was this, yeah, almost the same way.
Mm. All right. So this is all
It's
right. So this first lady at this point is gone, right? So she was on time for 8 months, and then all of a sudden took a turn, and the cold weather happened. Christmas Eve thing happened. Calls you up. Hey, can you help me out? No. Moving company comes in. You guys come in. Sheriff takes her out. All the stuff's on the front lawn. I guess just bring that full circle. So all the stuff goes on the front lawn, and then what happens?
she starts putting it in a box truck, and while my guys that I'm paying to move her out are moving her stuff onto the lawn, she offers to pay them to put it on the truck and take it to wherever it is that she's moving and unload it. And the guy, thankfully, like I said, I mean, being a fireman, we're pretty tight. And he said, "Ma'am, I think if you have money to pay me and my guys to move you, you probably need to give it to."
Rent, Reverend. Give it to the
Uh,
rent, Reverend.
give it to the Rev.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's where I was at. She left yeah. At that point, I was angry at still yet. I mean, she was watching me go in and out of the house. It was a very awkward situation, and one that I never want to be in again. And she left a huge mess. Pretty much took everything of value and just left the rest of the trash and everything else in my front yard. So then I had to pay somebody else for 2 days to go in there and clean up and pick everything up, listen to neighbors bitch about trash blowing in the yard. It was just it's like when I got done with that, I was ready to sell that place, is what I felt like. And I
Now,
actually told her that.
you told her that you were going to sell it?
That was the last thing I ever said to her. She said, "I'm sorry that this had to happen." I said, "Well, I hope you're happy because I'm probably going to sell this place after the experience I had with you. You're an absolute nightmare."
Wow.
I mean, I looked her in the eye and told her that as bad as, I mean, yeah, I try not to, I try to treat people with respect, but that lady had lost mine.
So, who ended up, just out of curiosity, who ended up putting her stuff in the truck? Did she actually pay those guys, or did she do it, or what?
She actually had some family show up and help her. So she wasn't there by herself. She had several family members show up and help her.
Now, for the
And they were
listeners,
very apologetic to me.
that's good. At least, I mean, not that it really solves
Yeah.
anything, but at least they were, yeah. For the
Yeah.
listeners who are probably screaming at their phones right now, some of them saying, "Well, you're an a-hole for kicking her out," and da 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 da. I mean, without getting into too much detail, this lady, if I remember correctly, you had told me at one point that she had some sort of essentially guaranteed income from some sort of government assistance or Social Security check or something like that, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. When I looked into her financials, just if she could afford the place, she had a retirement that was fairly substantial. I want to think it was like in the mid fours a month. So she had a
Oh, a
pension,
pension. Okay. Yep.
and so she got a check. I don't know if it was a social security check or what it was for raising her 2 grandkids that were both uh, children. They were, teenagers,
Yeah.
and so she got, I want to say 1250 bucks a piece for them. I mean, pretty much that she could have paid the rent and the utilities and everything else with what she got from them.
So it
She always
sounds
paid in
like.
a very weird form.
What do you mean? What do you mean by
She paid
weird
with
form?
money orders, which I'm
Oh,
fine with.
okay.
She paid. She insisted on meeting me and giving me a money order, and it was always. I'm not real familiar with exactly what it is. It's like Blue Dot or something. It's some sort of government payment, electronic payment deal. I don't.
Yeah.
It was just odd. It was not typical.
So this lady, between her pension income and what it sounds like some sort of Social Security checks for the grandkids, was bringing in no less than probably in the mid sixes, $6,500 a month, something like that. So it's not like she lost a job and legit couldn't pay you. It was just like, hey, fuck you, I'm not going to pay you because I don't feel like it or whatever the reason was, but I'm still getting this guaranteed money every month.
Right. Well, after I went in her apartment and saw that she was, I mean, the lady had a spending issue. She a shopaholic. I don't know what you want to call her, but I mean that's where my rent was. I was moving it out of the apartment and into the yard. I mean, high end stuff. It's yeah. It wasn't like that. She just was just a bum. She had a lot of nice things. She was a well put together lady. So nice. It was not. I don't know how to describe it other than she was just a piece of shit that didn't want to pay her rent.
Yeah.
And I really think she knew this system. I think she was a professional. I don't know what you call it,
Yeah,
professional renter,
professional
but
tenants. Yeah, that's what they call them. Yep.
yeah. And
Hmm.
she just knew the game, right? She did. She knew what I could do, what I couldn't do before I knew what I couldn't do or could do.
So lesson learned: always file your fucking lease where you can find it. That'll save you 30 days, right?
I let that was a yeah that would have saved me a few bucks probably.
All right. So that was the first one. So you didn't sell the place. She moves out. I guess you get it turned over. Somebody comes in and does a get ready, as we like to call it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then
I
it
am.
happened
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, it happened again, man. I really thought I was like, I'm gonna do my due diligence here. I'm really gonna, vet these people and meet them, and so I kind of went through the same process, and it had been a while, and so it's overwhelming again, and you're like, oh man, what was the question I like to ask to kind of person this is? Anyway, I ended up renting to a lady that was the same age as I am, so she, mid 30s, and she had a couple kids, and she was worked in a local factory, and but she made good money and she just worked a lot. I mean, she looked at her pay stubs, and she's working 65, 70 hours a week. I said, perfect. Somebody that's not going to be here. If you're not there, you can't tear anything up. You're going to go to work, pay your bills, and go to sleep. So within 2 weeks of her moving in, she had that wasn't approved. She had a man in there that wasn't approved or on the lease, and she told me she had two kids, and she ended up having five children. And this is a duplex, and so the next door neighbor, who was a great tenant, single mom, younger lady, she had never ever given me any issues or even complained, said anything about anything. And she called like, "Hey, I can't stand this. Like, they're playing music till 2 in the morning. They're smoking dope on the back porch. They're beating on the walls. It wasn't as bad because what you do, or what I did, and what I'm sure a lot of people that have rental property do, is you kind of make bluff type threats to see where you're at, right? You go, hey, the sheriff's coming out here next week. She paid her first month's rent. This lady did, and never paid another stitch of rent. Of course, I wasn't gonna let her get 2 months out before she went. So she was 10 days late. I said, you're out. And I actually went out there this time. I looked at what the sheriff's note said, and I just I just posted it on the door. Said you get 7 days to get out. And fortunately, I don't know how legal that is, but fortunately,
We don't give any legal
she
advice
I
on this
blew
show.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna go give the sheriff's department another like $50 and then $50 and $50. I just posted it on her door, and said you're evicted. And I kind of at least bluffed her out of there. She wasn't is the first lady,
So you
but
posted the
yeah.
notice and she just left?
Yeah, she left within a couple weeks. It was still kind of a pain in the butt, but she left a mess, which I mean, I figured as much. And then she actually left a dog there. That was
Hmm.
another play I tried to make was as I couldn't get in there, and you really got to be careful on like how you're doing stuff, how you're entering, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You just really legally, man, you really got to cover your bases. But I could hear a dog barking in there. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going in here. I'm trying. I told her. I texted her. I think 24 hour per the lease. 24 hour notice. I want to change the air filter. I was like, we'll see what this place looks like. Yeah, it wasn't in great shape. And there's a dog that I don't know how long it had been locked in the bathroom that was literally trying to chew a hole through the door. That it was just using the bathroom everywhere. And she hadn't been there, man. They moved out, left a bunch of stuff, and a dog. To get the Humane Society involved. You know what I'm saying? You got to kind of work all the angles there to
Right.
try to get them out,
Yep.
and it's just you kind of got to get creative at that point.
So what happens? The Humane Society rescues the dog and makes sure the dog's okay, or what?
Well, finally sent her a message. She quit answering my phone. I sent her a message on a social media site and was like, "Hey, there's a dog in here. I'm getting ready to get law enforcement involved, and you need to get it out of there. It's not even approved to be here, and it's destroying the apartment." And she came pretty short order. She was out, and then I mean, this is all within. I mean, it's been like the last 9 months. This is a nine month period that I really haven't received any rent from this side of this unit, and that it's just been like I wanted to screw the door shut and just be like, all right, this isn't a duplex anymore. This is just a single family home, and just rent the other side
That's
or
crazy.
sell it.
That's so. I mean, I guess I'm just
Yeah.
curious because that just is infuriating. I'm sure there's a bunch of listeners right now that are pissed and yelling at their phone or like, "Who the fuck does this lady think she is?" You know. So does she end up with her own dog back that she probably shouldn't have in the first place, or does the Humane Society was that just a threat to get them in there, or did they take the dog away, or what?
No, they had to go through a whole process too. And when I contacted her, she came and got the dog, and I'm sure it's
Mm,
probably still being mistreated to this day, unfortunately.
yeah, that's
Um,
I hate that.
yeah, pretty rough. I do too. She doesn't deserve to have a dog or children or anything. People out there like that, but apparently there's a bunch of them, and I'm learning that every day.
Yeah, well, and I'll just interject a quick story here because I did have my first eviction not too long ago, and I think the common theme, at least for what we've talked about so far, and of course it's a relatively small sample size, right? There's just two of us here talking, and I'm sure to like you mentioned your mom and how many they've been in the rental business for decades and they've never had that happen. So there's a lot of people that are not going to have this happen, and hopefully we never have it happen again. But I guess the theme that I'm seeing is that there's people that are going to present really well. There's people that are going to check out to be, well qualified to rent a place, but anything is possible, right? People are funny like that. And so the one that I just had, the company that I use a couple different companies, I'm in the process. I don't even know if I told you this yet, but I'm transferring one of our units over to this other company. So I'm only dealing with one property management firm. But what they have is what's called a transfer program, where if a tenant lives in any home that they manage for another investor and they want to leave and move to another house that company manages, they have to be there. I believe it's for at least 3 years, and they have to have at least 24 months or 2 years of consecutive on-time rental payments. So they're not just going to let them jump around year to year. I want this house, I want that house, I want that house, because they don't want to create a bunch of unnecessary turnover. So these people that ended up moving into, it's actually the very first rental that I bought, were part of that transfer program. So they had been in a house previously with the same management company for 3 years. They made on-time payments for at least 2 years. They transfer into one of my houses, and I don't remember exactly how long it was. They were there for a little while, and they were paying rent, and things seemed to be okay. And I might have actually talked about this on one of the previous shows. And then all of a sudden, they had a child, and I believe the wife was out of work for a time, so there was some issues going on there with not getting a paycheck and things like that. And then they got caught up, and we had to, in that particular state, get the attorney involved and say, hey, we file for eviction. And of course, they went ahead and covered all that, the fee and whatnot, to get back on track. And miraculously, all of a sudden, they caught up and paid all their rent, and everything was fine until it wasn't. And they ended up getting, long story short, 2 months behind, and eventually, basically, they just convinced them to move out without actually having to go through the formal eviction process. And it was pretty much like, hey, no pay, no stay type of thing. You guys got to go. And I don't know in excruciating detail because, again, I outsourced this, so I'm not, fortunately in situations like this, I'm not having to deal with the day-to-day of it, but I'm guessing that the property management company probably said to them, hey, you guys, if you don't want an eviction on your record, essentially, and you want to use us as a reference for wherever else you might go in the future, you still got a balance here. You need to make this right. And I remember logging into the property management portal one day, and all of a sudden I think it was an extra $250. I think the rent on that place at the time was $1,250 a month. Right now it's renting for $1,350. So we were able to raise the rent a little bit when they eventually moved out, and we got it re-rented. But they, I think, owed around $2,500, and they paid essentially 10% of that one month. And then this month, or last month, I should say, in July, they were supposed to make another payment. They didn't. So I've actually been in touch with the property management company today, and kind of working with them on that. But I mean, it's literally me sending an email, and they're doing all the hands-on stuff. So it does happen, and it can happen with people that you would never think that it would happen to, I guess is where I'm going with that, because these people, again, came from the transfer program, and they were good payers for the longest time, and then all of a sudden they weren't. And so, unfortunately, I got to pay the bank, right? So, they no pay, no stay.
Yeah, I get it completely.
And this is actually funny. I literally got this in the mail today. This is dated July 28th. I'm going to read this, or parts of this. So on the flip side of this, right, you have good tenants that stay for a long time. And one of the houses I bought several years ago, the initial folks that moved in are still there. I think they're going on year 4 at this point. And, they've almost always paid on time, obviously no eviction, and they've seemed to, from what we gathered in the past, take pretty good care of the place. Well, I get a letter in the mail today from the health department, and it basically says, dear property owner, on July 27th, 2023, an inspection was made of the above captioned premise, and the following unsanitary conditions marked below with an X were noted. And I won't read through all the ordinance codes, but there's 4 items on here. Please clean up your dirty chicken yard, remove excessive uneaten chicken feed from the ground, and store it in a metal container with a lid. Please cut the high grass/weeds at the rear and side of yard. And then the 4th one is remove junk, rubbish, tires, and debris from property and put at curb for pickup. You are requested to have the above unsanitary conditions corrected by August 10th, 2023, yada, yada, yada. So just completely out of the blue. So I literally scanned a copy of this right before we got on the podcast, shot it over to the property management company. They're super responsive. And, I think they actually wrote me back while we've been recording this podcast. Let me see if I can find it here real quick. Thank you for letting us know. We'll reach out to the resident, and rest assured, we'll take care of this issue for you. Have a great weekend. So, they're awesome for the most part. They'll have it handled, but, you just sometimes never know. I would never expect to get a letter like that from tenants that are going on 4 years worth of tenancy that never seemed to have been a problem, and apparently they got a fucking chicken yard. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. I just had to bring that up.
It sounds like a nice property there, cash flow king.
Yeah, it's actually not bad. It's probably the highest value property that I have in terms. Well, actually, I take that back. No, it is in terms of market value. It's probably the highest value property, and it is the second highest in terms of purchase price, because obviously prices have run up quite a bit, and the one that I bought after that was it's a smaller house, and it's not worth as much, but I probably paid a little too much for it. But anyway, that's another story. But yeah, it's not bad. It's a big ass house. It's bigger than my house. Things like 2,300 square feet or something like that. So it's
makes a good cockfighting area.
Apparently, maybe I need to raise the rent a little bit more and get an override or something on that. No, I'm not. I am totally against that. Don't even get me started with that shit. All right, let's see. Do we have anything else that we want to talk about with the eviction stuff, or anything we didn't get to that would be good for the listeners to hear about?
Yeah. hire a PM. That's where I went with it. Is I kept saying throughout the podcast, like I felt like I need to sell this place. I don't have the time to do it, and I decided, just like you, to let somebody else handle the headache and still keep the investment, even if the margins aren't as good. That's what I would point anybody to that's getting in the rental game, is to definitely dig into getting a good PM.
Yeah, I would say it's money well spent. I think I mentioned I'm in the process of transferring also on the insurance side, but that's a separate topic. But on the property management side, we have one property that effective September 1st is going to be managed by this other group that takes care of the rest of our stuff. And I just so happened to reach out to them, and long story short, when you get to a certain number of units, they will begin to offer a little bit of a discount on the monthly percentage that they take. And so for a while, we've been paying 10% of collected gross rents to the property management company for the most part. The other one, we were paying 8%, and now we're going to pay 8% on the entire portfolio, which is a nice little savings because, economies of scale, and I wasn't going to beat them up too badly, but I did ask about it, and they said, hey, if you're willing to transfer this property over to us, normally we don't start offering, a discounted PM fee until you have this many units, but you're pretty much, right there. So if you transfer this one over to us, we'll go ahead and do it for you. So I was happy to get that little bit of a discount. But with that said, if they said no, it's still going to be 10%. I would absolutely pay the 10% because they are for sure worth it, and it's one less thing I need to worry about. But so just something to keep in mind. But I would definitely strong second on the property management thing. I've never done it myself. I never want to do it myself. If I had to, I'd probably sell everything. So word to the listeners there, if you're going to get involved in rentals,
man. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the efficiency is just not there, especially if you're, the more volume you get and you can't manage them properly unless you just literally have nothing else to do. Your phone's going to ring all the time. You can't go to a concert or a ball game or watch your kids do so, any weekend you go to. You can about set your watch to it. Somebody's going to call and say the toilet's running or a light bulb's out or their neighbor's parked in their spot, or it's always something, and it's just not worth it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, we have some friends that still do self-manage, and I like to joke around sometimes, but even when we're hanging out on the weekend or we go out to dinner or whatever the case might be, there's been plenty of times where they're on their phone and they're having to step aside to talk about stuff, and, oh, this tenant texted me or so-and-so just called, and it's a pain in the ass, I'm just ready to grab another beer and get on with it. I'm not worried about it, right? You might have to send an occasional email. The health department might tell you that you got a shithole that your tenants need to clean up or something, but other than that, you literally send an email and pretty much it's handled. So that's kind of nice. All right, well, we've gone a bit here. I think we've covered most of the stuff. Are you good if we kind of wrap up?
Oh yeah, I'm good.
All right, well, once again, this was episode 54, Evictions Happen, featuring the Rent Reverend. We appreciate him being on the show. Also a premium subscriber. One more shameless plug to all you guys out there. We would truly appreciate your support if you decide to become a premium subscriber to the show. Click the link in the show notes. You can read about the benefits you get there. It really does mean the world to us. I would say that I get more excited when I get a email that says new subscription than pretty much anything else. So it's, I don't know why, but it's just kind of a cool thing, and we really get to see the results of what we're doing and the fact that people actually give a shit and want to help support the show. And, it really does mean the world to us. So thanks again for your consideration. Thanks for listening to the show. We truly appreciate it. We will see you in the next episode.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.